A Capitol Hill shouting match over a tweet turns into something no one expects, until a grieving mother stands, a corporate memo leaks, and everything suddenly shifts. It started like most hearings: quiet tension, suited staff, muted clicks from reporters. The House Subcommittee on Civic Discourse and Public Safety had called a session. The subject: Tesla protests, and the rising unrest around its factories. Cameras rolled, but no one expected much. The agenda seemed symbolic. But the players were not. Pam Bondi, the U.S. Attorney General, sat composed, fingers laced over a manila folder. Her magenta blazer caught the light, intentional, but not theatrical. Across the chamber, Representative Jasmine Crockett scrawled a note across a legal pad. She didn't glance up. She knew what was coming. At 10:01 a.m., the chairwoman opened the session. Bondi's mic clicked on. In recent months, she said, we've seen protests escalate into something else: broken property, injured workers. But it didn't start with bricks. It started with words. She raised a printed tweet. Some billionaires need to be taken down before they take down the rest of us. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't accuse directly. But she didn't need to. The tweet belonged to Crockett. It wasn't a call to violence, Bondi continued. But words don't exist in a vacuum. Crockett didn't respond yet. She sat still. Her pen hovered over her pad but didn't move. When she finally did speak, her voice was even. That tweet is critique, not a threat. If someone hears violence in that, I'd argue it says more about them than it does about me. The chairwoman intervened before either could continue. Let's remember, this is not a trial. But narratives have weight. And this one is heavy. The exchange landed in headlines before lunch. But the moment that shifted the room wasn't between the two women. It came from the third row. A woman stood. Small frame. Navy blouse. Trembling hands. She held a photo. My name is Claudia Reyes, she said. My son works at the Fremont plant. He was shoved during the protest. He's afraid to return. No theatrics. No demands. Just presence. I know none of you told anyone to hurt him. But someone heard you. And they didn't hear what you meant. She sat. No one spoke. The silence was different this time. The chairwoman called for a 5-minute recess. But no one moved. Aides hovered quietly. Lawmakers sat still. Even the press row held back. The session had changed. Not because of the argument, but because of Claudia Reyes. Pam Bondi remained seated. She wasn't taking notes anymore. She looked forward, unreadable. But something had shifted in her posture. Less measured. More still. Across the chamber, Jasmine Crockett poured herself a glass of water. Her hand trembled slightly before she set the cup down. When she sat again, her eyes met Pam's. For a long moment, either woman looked away. When the session resumed, it was Bondi who spoke first. That wasn't a legal argument, she said. It was a reminder that consequences aren't always about laws. Sometimes they're about fear. Sometimes they're about a mother trying to get her son to go back to work. Her tone wasn't sharp. It wasn't soft either. It was steady. Controlled. I still believe words can escalate. And when they do, it's not always because of intent. It's because of the space between what we say and how it's heard. Crockett didn't interrupt. When she spoke, her voice was lower than before. I don't disagree that words matter, she said. But I won't accept that every outcome of public protest is laid at the feet of political speech. I speak because people don't listen until we make them uncomfortable. She looked down briefly, then back up. I've seen Tesla workers who can't afford the cars they build. I've seen investors double their net worth while janitors skip insulin. When I speak sharply, it's not to provoke chaos. It's to name something real. Pam didn't flinch. But she listened. The chairwoman leaned forward. We've heard positions. Now I want responses. To Pam. Do you believe this tweet directly caused the unrest? No, she replied. But I believe it shaped the environment that made it easier to justify. To Jasmine. Would you phrase it differently? Probably not, she said. But maybe I'd add a sentence afterward. One that made my point harder to twist. Neither answer pleased everyone. But both landed. Then came Dr. Liano Green, a political communication scholar. Calm. No agenda. Outrage travels faster than truth, he said. The audience often decides what your words mean before you've even finished the sentence. He looked at both women. You didn't intend violence. But that's not the only variable. Then he asked the real question. Who owns the space between expression and effect? The answer came in sequence. Crockett. I'll own it. If someone got hurt and I could have said something clearer, then yes, I'll do better. Bondi. We own it. Not from guilt. From duty. There was no applause. Then the chairwoman received a message. A formal request from Tesla. They wanted a statement entered into the record. Pam's jaw tightened. Jasmine leaned back. No one objected. But the hearing was no longer just about rhetoric. Something larger had entered the room. Tesla's letter wasn't read aloud. It didn't need to be. Its presence said enough. A company with billions in valuation had chosen this moment, mid-hearing, mid-tension, to enter the record. It wasn't a defense. It was a maneuver. Pam Bondi knew the tactic. She'd seen corporations do it before, insert a carefully worded statement just early enough to frame the narrative that follows. Tesla's language was precise. Muted. Not blame. Not denial. Just one phrase stuck out. Recent political discourse has complicated our ability to ensure employee safety. Not caused. Not contributed. Complicated. Jasmine Crockett read the line 3 times. The chairwoman moved to final remarks. Pam went first. No notes. I started this hearing focused on speech. On its risks. But I now see something else. Influence isn't always accidental. Sometimes it's curated. Sometimes we're not reacting to chaos. We're absorbing someone else's plan. She paused. I still believe public figures must be responsible. But I now believe something more dangerous is at play. Not unintentional harm. Calculated diversion. She sat. Jasmine didn't rebut. When this began, I felt like I was being cross-examined for a sentence. She said. But I've listened. Not just to Pam, but to Claudia. To the witnesses. And now to a corporate memo that didn't ask for justice, just control. She folded her hands. If we're honest, we know that people don't hear everything we say. They hear the parts that match their fears. That's not an excuse. It's a condition of the times. Then came the leak. It didn't come from Tesla. Not directly. At 7:42 a.m. the next morning, a national political reporter received an anonymous email, a copy of an internal Tesla strategy memo, dated 2 weeks before the Fremont protest. The document was dry. Procedural. But one line stood out. We may be able to leverage public outrage to divert attention from recent security lapses. Monitor political discourse closely. Pam Bondi's staff confirmed the email within hours. She didn't call a press conference. She didn't issue a quote. She circled 2 words in red ink. Leverage outrage. Across DC, Jasmine Crockett stared at the same line. Her comms director stood beside her. They didn't just expect unrest. Jasmine said quietly. They counted on it. Her voice didn't shake. But her eyes did. The hearing hadn't been a clash over recklessness. It had been a stage. And someone had written the script. By noon, the leak had spread. Axios posted the memo first, followed by Politico. Most headlines were cautious. Tesla's strategy memo raises new questions. But the subtext was clear. The hearing wasn't just reactive, it had been manipulated. Pam Bondi called no press conference. Instead, she convened a meeting. No cameras. No prepared statements. Just legal staff, 2 deputies, and one goal. Verify everything, she said, and mapped the timeline. What mattered now wasn't outrage. It was pattern. The memo's wording. Monitor narrative viability, third-party culpability optics. Wasn't accidental. It was calibrated. Across the Capitol, Jasmine Crockett didn't go quiet. But she didn't go loud either. She met with her legislative director and speechwriter. If we run to the cameras, she said, they'll say we're trying to flip the story. Her voice was steady. If we stay silent, they'll let it rot. Her staff waited. We need a third lane, she said. Restraint, with receipts. That afternoon, both offices moved independently, but deliberately. Pam filed a request to the DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibility. Not a criminal probe. Not yet. Just a formal review of whether Tesla had knowingly omitted material information from a federal oversight session. Jasmine, meanwhile, began drafting new legislation. It wasn't flashy. It wouldn't trend. But it had teeth. The bill would require corporations to disclose any internal memos discussing protest-related strategy if those discussions intersected with worker safety or federal proceedings. It wasn't performative. It was surgical. By 5 p.m., both women issued short public statements. Pam's read: if Tesla executives knowingly withheld internal strategy that shaped public discourse during a federal inquiry, it's not just unethical, it's disqualifying. Government is not a shield for corporate damage control. Jasmine's came as a 57-second video. No background music. No cheering. I was accused of sparking unrest with the tweet. But now we see someone else was hoping exactly that would happen. This isn't left versus right. This is about power, and who gets to wield it without consequence. Neither statement attacked the other. Neither name-checked Tesla directly. But both landed. The public reaction was different now. Calmer. Focused. Pam's comment briefly trended, not because it was dramatic, but because it was rare. A top law official refusing to protect a Fortune 500 narrative. Jasmine's video spread across political feeds, not with rage, but with recognition. The story was never about the tweet. One post read: it was about who benefits when we turn on each other. The next morning, aides from both offices noted the shift inside the building. No one was asking about the tweet anymore. They were asking, how long had Tesla known? And who else had read that memo? 3 days after the leak, the headlines slowed. The viral clips faded. But something heavier settled in. Inside Capitol offices, doors closed more often. Meetings got quieter. Calendars filled with names no one discussed out loud: regulatory staff, counsel from oversight committees, advisors from the SEC. Pam Bondi wasn't chasing media. She didn't need to. She'd already initiated an interagency review. It wasn't criminal yet. But it pulled in departments that usually didn't share notes. Civil rights. Securities. Communications ethics. Each received the same instruction: track timeline, map intent. She reread the Tesla memo every night that week. Not looking for illegality. Looking for a pattern. There was one sentence she circled again and again: public officials may inadvertently carry the message we prefer. It wasn't explosive. But it was revealing. Pam had once believed the hearing was about reckless rhetoric. Now she saw something else: narrative engineering cloaked in crisis. Jasmine Crockett took a different path. No interviews. No Instagram clips. She turned down 3 primetime bookings. Instead, she worked her bill. Quietly. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't vague. It was specific. The Corporate Transparency in Crisis Communications Act would require any company to disclose internal messaging strategies if they anticipated public unrest and had material information related to safety, labor, or federal oversight. It didn't aim to punish words. It aimed to expose strategy. 2 moderate Republicans signed on. Then a pro-labor Democrat. Not because they agreed with Jasmine's politics. Because the bill had structure. In a closed-door session, Crockett met with the chairwoman and Pam. No press. No staffers. This was never about incitement. Jasmine said. It was about someone else using our tension to hide their failures. Pam nodded. And counting on us not to notice. The chairwoman didn't smile. She just said, this is a credibility test. For all of us. The words weren't grand. But they landed. No joint statement followed. No photo op. But something had changed. Pam's briefings got tighter. Less rhetorical. More procedural. She wasn't building a case against speech anymore. She was building one for clarity. Jasmine's speeches got shorter. Still forceful, but measured. Don't write for applause, she told her speechwriter. Write to be understood. Harder to twist that way. Then came the third hearing. It wasn't advertised. No hashtags. Just a slot on the House schedule and a simple title: Final Remarks and Findings. No Tesla lawyers. No protests. Just the weight of what had already happened. The hearing room wasn't full. But the right people were there. PBS. ProPublica. Judiciary aides with yellow notepads. This wasn't the end of a story. It was the start of a record. The hearing room was colder this time. Not in temperature, in tone. There were no raised voices. No press surges. Only the sound of polished shoes on tile and the quiet rustle of folders being opened for the last time. Pam Bondi arrived alone, carrying a single manila file. Jasmine Crockett brought nothing but a legal pad. Both women had spoken already, many times. But this hearing wasn't about argument. It was about recognition. Not of who had won, but of what had actually happened. The chairwoman opened with words that acknowledged what most in the room already knew. We're not here to relitigate a tweet. We're here to name what came after. A moment in which public speech, corporate planning, and public harm intersected, and no one took full responsibility. Until now. Pam Bondi spoke first. I came into this process asking where the line is, between strong language and real danger. But that wasn't the right question. The line we found was between power and manipulation. Her voice didn't rise. But it didn't waver either. That line was crossed. Not by those who spoke bluntly, but by those who stayed quiet while we tore each other apart. She referenced the memo once. No names. No accusations. Just the act. A corporate entity knowingly positioned itself behind our rhetoric. Not to protect workers. Not to reduce harm. But to shape the fallout. She paused. I've submitted a formal request for the Department of Justice to examine that behavior. If misconduct is found, there will be consequences. But the larger problem is this: if we allow corporate actors to operate in the shadows of public outrage, then these hearings, this institution, loses meaning. She sat down. There was no applause. Just the sound of a pen tapping quietly on wood. Jasmine Crockett stood next. I was told my language endangered people. I didn't dismiss that. I examined it. And I responded. But now we know that someone else was counting on that danger. Hoping it would be loud enough to cover their negligence. She looked around the room once. Not defiantly. Just directly. I've drafted legislation requiring companies to disclose internal strategies when they expect public protest and choose to let it happen. It's not about punishing strategy. It's about surfacing motive. She paused. Because accountability isn't about winning arguments. It's about structure. If we don't build systems that respond to manipulation, then the cost will always land on people like Claudia Reyes and her son. There was a long silence. Then the chairwoman closed her folder. I want to thank both of you, she said. Not for agreeing, but for staying. For absorbing what was said, and what wasn't, and for responding without retreating into performance. She tapped her gavel once. Not loudly. The room didn't clear quickly. There was no media scrum. Just quiet nods, a few quiet notes, and two women walking out, not toward microphones, but toward exits. That evening, one clip circulated. Pam Bondi. We're not here to censor. We're here to lead. And then another. Jasmine Crockett. We speak for people who don't get heard. That comes with a cost. I accept it. Neither clip went viral. But both stuck. In the days after the hearing, media attention drifted. Cable segments thinned. Social media moved on. But inside the Capitol, and across agencies, nothing had actually ended. The DOJ's internal review didn't announce itself. It didn't issue subpoenas or public statements. But emails were requested. Calendars examined. A quiet conversation began across offices that don't usually coordinate. At Tesla, no one resigned. No one gave a press conference. But their legal team released an internal memo, new guidelines for how political discourse should be handled during periods of protest. It didn't admit wrongdoing. It codified behavior. Pam Bondi received a copy. She didn't annotate it. She didn't speak about it publicly. She just filed it. Aides noticed a change. In briefings, Pam spoke less about public unrest and more about how government becomes complicit when it allows itself to be used. Her tone was procedural. Almost distant. Like someone who'd seen the edge of something much larger than partisanship, and didn't want to fall in again. Jasmine Crockett, meanwhile, focused on the bill. It didn't move fast. It wasn't popular. But it gained support, quietly. Even some who had criticized her tone now acknowledged her logic. Transparency isn't a punishment, she told them. It's a tool. One that shouldn't belong only to shareholders. Her next speech on the House floor contained no metaphors. No fire. Just structure. A timeline. A motive. A proposal. Her staff said later they barely recognized it. Not because it was off-brand. Because it was stripped of everything except clarity. Weeks passed. Then, in a staff orientation for new congressional aides, a trainer passed out an excerpt from the hearing's transcript. One line was underlined. A note from the chairwoman's margin, written in red. So where do we draw the line? And beneath it, scribbled in pen, someone else had added, "Maybe we don't. Maybe we learn how to stand on it without falling off." In the end, there were no indictments. No dramatic takedowns. But something stuck. A memo that revealed more than it said. A tweet that wasn't the story. A mother's quiet grief that did more than any speech could. No resolution. Just a new standard. The kind that doesn't trend, but doesn't go away either. And two women, Pam and Jasmine, who left that hearing with fewer answers, but more responsibility. They never released a joint statement. But they didn't need to. The silence between them had already become something else. Structure. Memory. Warning. And somewhere inside the DOJ's database, a new category was quietly added to internal review protocols. Narrative manipulation as a risk vector. Not a crime. Not yet. But something to watch. Something to name. And maybe, next time, something to stop before it begins.